IVM.
Hi, welcome to another episode of a show about crypto. And last week, we spent some time delving into the world of DeFi or decentralized finance. Today, I'd like to focus on a more specific aspect of decentralized finance, which is the DAO, or the Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And to discuss DAOs with me, I have with me Gaurav Garg, who is the head of research and crypto expert at CapitalVia. Gaurav, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rohan. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
It's so great to talk to you. And so I'm going to jump right into it. Gaurav, what is a DAO in the world of decentralized finance?
So, Rohan, if I talk about DAO is Decentralized Autonomous Organization. So as the name suggests, it's an organization that is fully automated, an organization that fully run on codes. So as far we store information at the present scenario through humans. So for example, if I want to know how much hiring a new person would cost, I'll ask Ajit from the human resource department. If I want to get my travels reimbursed, I'll ask Shubham from the accounts department. Instead, in DAO, we have codes that we use as smart contracts through the help of Ethereum technology. And through this, computers automatically takes over much of our decision making and operations we see nowadays. Okay. So the end result is
How does that work? Sorry.
So the final control is actually taken still by humans, because the shareholders, they have that voting right, just like regular corporations. So they dictate general directions of accepting or declining any sort of initiatives that has taken place. So at the present scenario, another crazy thing about DAO is there is total of $1 billion of value that is locked in smart contracts, and approximately 65,000 members are on that. So it is not that new.
Okay, 65,000 members are part of this one, you're saying of this one DAO?
No, of the entire AUM, that is asset under management of DAO.
Okay, and so sorry to just get out of, because I'm somebody that does not understand complicated jargon. When you say asset under management of a DAO and 65,000 people, could you just break that down for me a little bit, please?
So what I'm trying to say is there are various DAOs that are present in the market. So for each DAO, there are different funding. So if I take an example, there was a DAO called The DAO, which took place in 2016. So they had an ICO launch, and that event ran for 15 days. So in that, the funding that they were looking for, they actually gained $150 million of funding through that event. So that is the total asset under management. They had that function.
Right.
So after that, there were various certain incidents that happened, that took place. So that is the overall asset under management of each and every DAO that we follow.
Right. So since you brought up the DAO, some of the events that transpired at the DAO led to the fork in Ethereum, if I'm not mistaken, and essentially the segregation into Ethereum Classic and the Ethereum that we sort of use more broadly today. So my question here is, this is obviously not a foolproof enterprise. Could you shed some light on what happened with the DAO in 2016?
Yeah, I'll share the entire story. It was a very well-known DAO, which I mentioned earlier, the DAO. It was formed by an investor that was directed by venture capital, and it was founded in 2016. And it actually got famous because of its failure.
Right.
The ICO that DAO was collected, they collected a staggering amount of $150 million.
Right.
And more than almost 18,000 investors participated on a 15-day funding event. Shortly after, the DAO account was hacked, and the unknown attackers stole almost $15 million worth of Ethereum.
Wow.
And then as a result, that Ethereum had to result and enter into a hard fork. And that's where Ethereum and Ethereum Classic came into the picture.
Correct.
So after this event, the investors actually supported the subside and the incident. And the event has actually been famous, an example of how fragile a DAO can be to certain attacks.
Right. So given that a DAO can be so fragile to certain attacks, and given that it's not a perfect system, what are certain advantages then that a DAO has over a traditional organization? Which, while again, I'm not saying traditional organizations are not susceptible to things like hacks or attacks, but what advantage does a DAO give you that then makes this sort of fragility or this vulnerability worth it?
So, Rohan, if I compare the DAOs with traditional organization, I'll point out the major pointers that are DAOs are usually flat and these are fully democratized. And traditional organizations are generally structural.
Yes.
If I compare it with the traditional enterprises, the greater advantage of DAO is greater transparency. Because anybody is able to see all your actions and funds that is there in DAO. And it actually reduces the risk of corruption or censorship. So if I talk about any listed companies that are present there in the market, you are only able to see the audited financial statements on a quarterly basis once they are released. But in DAOs, the balance sheet is actually, it actually exists to the public at any given time. At any given time, you can check the financials or the transactions of a DAO organization. But then, however, if I also compare traditional organizations, DAO is easier to access globally. And because it has a very low barrier to entry. And given higher transparency and lower barrier to entry, if there are DAO members who do not agree with the rules and actions, so the switching cost may be relatively low.
The switching cost to what? To in the sense?
Because if I want to go from a domestic perspective to global, the switching cost won't take much time because you're on a virtual platform.
Sure.
And so through this, bribery, networking, nepotism, this won't work in DAO. And because of that, strong consistency makes DAO a reliable business partner, because such an organization is harder to put under pressure. And it will be very difficult to put any sort of ban from the operating somewhere, like if they are operating from anywhere. If I give a very short example, for example, if CBI is practicing by forcing companies into cooperating, that won't work anymore because there is no central authority to put under pressure. And DAOs are often stateless and distributed over millions of computers. So there is no single government that could decide to take it down.
Right. To then come at it another way, right? On the one hand, you're saying, yes, and I agree with you, right? It's great that you won't have things like bribery or corruption or nepotism or any of those things. But the flip side to that coin is that while traditional structures do have those things, they also have that human touch also has another side to it, which is that they have redressal mechanisms that have a human side to them. Like today, for example, if I have a problem or if I have something like that, or today, let's talk about today, whether it's harassment or whatever, there is an HR person I can go to, or there's, if say something is done wrong, or if there's a salary error or whatever, there's a human being I can go to and have that checked out. So how does a DAO take care of that stuff?
So I'll give you a very short example. Like you might have heard of a vending machine, right?
Yep.
So vending machine is meant to make a human life better through technology. So at this certain point, you are stuck with technology because that is not entirely DAO. You need human intervention to make it completely DAO. So for example, if your inventory goes down on the vending machine, you have to fill it manually. You have to pay your electricity bills of the vending machine manually. You have to take out the cash from the vending machine manually. So what DAO does is you fill all the nodes of those inventories through codes. So for example, if I have an electricity bill of XYZ dollars and I have to fill that, I have to pay that bill would be automatically paid. The money would be automatically connected from each node. So once you make that entire system autonomous, you achieve a DAO. So in the present scenario, there are not much companies who are fully DAOs, except a few. But then there are various companies who are into partial DAOs. So if I give an example, Uber can be a part of partial DAO.
How so?
See, the job of Uber is to get you from one place to another, but they don't own any taxis. What they do is they connect you from the passengers to the cab drivers. And once you book, after you achieve everything, the only task where humans are involved are the operational aspects on the back end. So that is how it's into a partial DAO stage. It only gets into entire DAO stage when there are no humans involved in the entire process of Uber. So that is why when I say that if there are organizations who are into partial DAOs, this is the exact reason why I'm stating that.
All right, we're going to take a short break. We are in conversation with Gaurav Garg about DAOs, and we will continue right after this.
Intel vPro provides the complete manageability tools to detect, repair, and protect your devices remotely, so your workforce can keep doing what they do best wherever they're working from. Today, as most employees and IT teams no longer work under the same roof, fixing glitchy PCs and proactively managing the PC fleet has become increasingly difficult. The Intel vPro platform addresses these problems. With its Intel Active Management technology, also known as Intel AMT, vPro enables IT to keep mission-critical resources running by establishing a secure connection between IT and an Intel vPro platform PC. In the event of a cyber attack, Intel AMT lets IT remotely manage and repair systems simultaneously, even if they are dispersed across multiple locations. PCs can be recovered quickly wherever they may be. Plus, the Intel Endpoint Management Assistant enables cloud-based manageability using simple web-based tools to connect with and remediate any Intel vPro platform PC. Both these tools provide better manageability and faster response time. This results in substantial device management support cost savings and fewer help desk tickets. Visit intel.n/IT heroes to know more. Intel vPro is built for business.
And we are back from our ad break and a word from our sponsors, because we have sponsors. And we are in conversation with Gaurav Garg about DAOs. You mentioned that these organizations are decentralized and stateless, which then makes it impossible for, say, a single government to shut them down or anything like that. But again, then how do you handle jurisdictional issues in cases of if the organization is involved in, say, if there's a fraud or there's a hack or if there's any of those things? How does jurisdiction work in case of any kind of, I mean, yes, I know that a DAO was built to avoid malpractice, but supposing it does occur, this is the brave new world we live in, right? What are you doing? One question is philosophically, are you prosecuting a machine? What jurisdiction are you prosecuting in? How would that work?
So, Rohan, actually, DAOs were actually meant to form a sort of e-governance.
Okay.
So, if you might have heard about it, because if I talk about what actual governance is, from a very structural perspective, a governance is basically a set of agreements which we have different between the parties. And these agreements take form of contracts, individual rules, formal or informal agreements, guidelines, processes, or any sort of procedures that we follow. But collectively, this constitution, or we may call as a rule book, regulates the conduct and relation between the parties or the entities. So if I take blockchain into this picture, using blockchain-based smart contracts, we have a self-executing set of agreements. And these agreements would be open, secure, and provide accountability and transparency. Because furthermore, like each parties could be sure that commitment would be kept.
Right.
Thus, it is possible to visualize an organization where all internals and external relationships are managed via blockchain smart contracts.
Right.
Because a smart DAO would exist in virtual space with smart contracts, and they manage relationship between all the key actors that are present there in the governance.
Right.
And the organization would have no central control, and it would be administered entirely on web. And it would have no reliance on any conventional legal contracts. So autonomous machines, agents would actually manage most activities and agreements and would be self-enforcing via blockchain.
Right.
And what I see is, what my perspective is, sooner many countries would be the first to adopt blockchain governance and provide the model for more transparency, high scalability, or better efficiency, or at least resistant to external pressure by any sort of external or any system to follow.
Right.
There might be various challenges if we form any sort of e-governance, because if I see, like, while numerous challenges exist in the from the technology or any sort of legal or regulatory perspective, there are already some developing countries that are moving towards blockchain-based real estate registration or transfer system.
Could you give me an example of a country that's doing something like that? That sounds cool.
Yeah, so New Zealand is one of the countries that is doing that. And in these countries, what actually happens is the corruption, and because the corruption or any lack of accountability are major problems. So blockchain has actually solved this problem. Blockchain actually offers a way to get around these challenges and introduce a secure property rights. So it all depends on how you adopt this DAO, because it came a very long time back. If you see, 2016 it was the existence of DAO. But then it actually got defunct because of the incident that has happened. And not many companies or many DAOs are actually present at the moment. But there are few companies or DAOs which are present. If I talk about, there's a NF DAO.
Yeah, I'd love to understand an example of an existing DAO, because I get the sense that so far the DAO is an idea. It's an idea and in some ways an ideal.
Right.
I'm a little bit struggling to understand real world examples currently. And I understand that that's fine with early stages of ideas. But please, if you give me an example of an existing DAO.
So I'll give you first a real life example of a DAO. It's an example of Dash. It's an open source cryptocurrency. In fact, it's actually the first DAO Dash, and it is run by a subset of users. And these are called masternodes. These are the owner of masternodes, and they have voting rights for that. You can also state them as the shareholders. And the vote on new proposals, because they vote on all the new proposals, the concerns of future of the organization. So any master node, even they get dividend of 45% on newly created Dash.
Okay.
And there is no central authority or any other than these master nodes. So these are and for a DAO, Dash is also very complex because 10% of all the newly created Dash coins goes to the treasury.
Right.
So these treasury is watched over by the DAO shareholders, and anybody can submit ideas on how to spend this money. It is a sort of venture capitalist. If I have some idea, I want to implement those ideas, I have to present those ideas in front of the shareholders. If they like those ideas, the approval will actually unlock the funding that is required by my project.
Right. Got it.
And Dash is actually very well known for one of its privacy feature, private send, because it allows all the users to pay anonymously. And these, it is actually very critically, because the main privacy feature is it is beneficial for all the illegal transactions.
Right.
So this is a real life example of a very successful DAO, if I state, because Dash is actually been functioning for a really long time, and this is actually one of the real life examples which you can take into picture. If I talk about the current scenario or a real life example of DAO.
Got it. And where you mentioned, are we realistically, is this something that we're going to see the public sector adopt more? Like, since you mentioned e-governance, etc., do DAOs have a future in the public sector?
What I think is, in sort of e-governance, DAO actually has a future, because once you have that set rules, the corruption actually is out of the picture. And because of transparency and all the ledgers are available to public, all your commitments are met. And after meeting all the commitments, you sort of have that capability to run through the public. And because DAO is actually, like, I can't state that it would be 100% implemented, but then if I see the adoption rate that is going at the moment, I can see that e-governance can be a part of 21st century.
Okay. And in the private sector, for example, could something like an Amazon be a DAO, like at some point? Like, is that what we're looking at? Or is this like a whole different space, and does it work better for things like venture capital and fund investing?
So what if I tell you, Rohan, that have you heard about Amazon Go? Or if I tell you if there's a store that is fully operated by AI.
Okay. I have heard of Amazon Go, but the store that's completely operated by AI and?
Exactly. So it is a form of DAO, but then it falls under a partial DAO, because Amazon already has a store, Amazon Go, and they brand it as Amazon Fresh in the UK. And it is fully operated by AI. So what we need in a DAO is there should be no human intervention, right? So here we have that partial DAO. No human intervention is involved in Amazon Go, only at the place where you have to fill these inventories.
Mm-hmm.
But if I look around the shopping experience of any customer, once you pick the item and you just have to go, it's a go checkout. You just have to get out of the store and you get the bill. So this is a form of partial DAO that Amazon can, this is a real life example where I can say that Amazon might become a DAO someday.
Okay.
But eventually so it clearly states that the companies in today's dates most of the companies in today's date are in the state of partial DAO, and sooner or later, when the adoption rate increases, we can see a lot of organizations that are completely dissolving themselves into DAO framework.
Right. So in something like a DAO framework though then, right, where say decisions are being taken either on the basis of votes or AI on the blockchain. So like a genuine question here, like especially in the world of finance, for example, then say we go the DAO way. What happens to, say, your job, Gaurav, in that situation? Like, how does that fundamentally change? All the way to, do you still have this job that you are currently doing? Does that still exist in a world that has moved to DAOs? And if not, and if it does exist, in what different state does it exist? is what I'm trying, because there's a lot of talk here, obviously, of automation and removal of humans. But the fact is that people are going to need jobs and money. So what happens to, say, especially since we have been talking a lot about the world of finance for one, is, so say, how would your role evolve if your company or if your organization moved to a more DAO framework?
Right. So if I talk about my job, if there's a complete autonomous, or if entire process become autonomous, I'll say that in finance, there are a lot of sectors that you need to take care about. Because if I talk about research, you have to do all those technical, fundamental, and quantitative analysis, which a process or a algo would actually do. But then there's this one small thing that is left in the market, that are sentiments. And a machine cannot and can never judge any sentiments.
Okay.
And once those sentiments, because a researcher would definitely not go into all those quant, technical, and analytical, but then he would also go and look forward for sentiments of the market.
Right.
So I don't think a machine can entirely, substitute a researcher, but then it can actually help a researcher to get more accurate trades, or it can help actually make more better market predictions. It could help me analyze a market in a very better state. So I would say that my job would be safe. I would not be going anywhere if DAO comes into picture. But then even if there's DAO, there would be humans that would be needed to take some decisions, because at the end of the day, you need those tokens to have that voting right.
Sure.
So I hope you understand, because for example, if there's a CapitalVia DAO and I am releasing 1 million tokens to the public.
Right.
So to have those voting rights, I'll distribute all those tokens, and the person who's having maximum tokens would be having the maximum weightage on my voting.
Right. So those tokens are in essence just shares then.
Exactly. It's a form of traditional shareholdings, but then on a virtual platform.
Got it.
But here, these are more transparent, because what happens is anybody on any platform would be able to see your transactions. But then there's also a disadvantage to that all your operations are public on a public platform. And for example, if DAOs are basically open source, and DAO being an open source, they are also prone to attackers. So the codes that are available to all the developers are also available to all the attackers.
Right. So that's a problem. I mean, how do you protect against something like that?
So that's the entire point here, because even if I talk about blockchain, I talk about cryptocurrencies, or I talk about DAO, these are all on the budding stage. So once the adoption increases, the technology increases, so sooner or later, this might be more secure or more transparent. But the only reason we are not able to enter into full DAO state is because there are a lot of security issues that might be there with DAO.
Got it. So that's actually very, very informative. I'm just going to try and sum it up. Please feel free to interrupt me and correct me if I'm wrong anywhere. DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. This is an organization that essentially aims to distribute decision-making power and transparency across the blockchain by replacing a lot of what would be human interaction-based functions or decisions with decisions that are made by transparent voting on the blockchain, or through smart contracts that trigger automatically when actions are taken. So payments happen when payments are supposed to happen, work happens when work is supposed to happen, etc. All of that. They're an interesting idea in the sense that you're looking at an organization that is democratic in terms of the people who are the shareholders and the value holders. They get to make decisions. We're looking at an organization that is inherently stateless, which is great and interesting, but also leaves questions of jurisdiction. And we're looking at organizations that still, because they're in their infancy, have not yet fully sort of matured as an idea. And there are still security issues that need to be addressed for this to take its next leap forward into being all it can be.
Right, Rohan.
Is that accurate?
You got it 100%.
Thank you. That was a little complex, but thank you so much, Gaurav, for being patient and answering my questions. I really appreciate it. I'm going to be honest and say this was an area of decentralized finance that confused me, but you've been very lucid. So thank you. I appreciate it. This has been a show about crypto, and my guest today has been Gaurav Garg, who has talked to us about DAOs. Gaurav, thank you so much for being on the show, and we will see you all again next week with another episode.
Hey everybody, it's been a great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus Says, Chef Saransh Goyla talks to Cyrus about his food show, Grand Trunk Rasoi, his experience as a guest judge on MasterChef Australia, and a whole lot more. On All Things Policy, Pratik Vagre talks to Sapni GK and Rohan to examine the fine print in the Apple versus Epic Games lawsuit. On a bonus episode of Paisa Vaisa, Anupam is joined by Sumit Chanda, CEO at Jarvis Invest. They discuss why investing directly in equity is a better proposition than other financial platforms. On Say No to Drama, Chetna slices through all the time-related nonsense that we throw at ourselves instead of using our time wisely. And on Audio Gyan, Shahina Attarwala from Microsoft talks to Kedar and Abhineet about her decade-long design career and why she likes to call herself a businesswoman with a designer's heart. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. It really does help us. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week, Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quota, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and Intel vPro. Thank you so much for making this possible.
पेश खिदमत है आपकी शान में हमारे अंजुमन से. Hi, I am Sadaf.
And I'm Arshit. खाने का इतिहास, इकोनॉमिक्स, पॉलिसी, साइकोलॉजी सब है मेन्यू पे.
Only on the Naan Curry podcast every Wednesday. सिर्फ IVM podcast ऐप या वेबसाइट पर या फिर जहां से भी आप अपने पॉडकास्ट सुनते हो.